Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs forum. I'm Sue Thomas, president of City Club, and I welcome you all, those of you here at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB or KBPS radio, or watching on Portland Community Media's CityNet 30. Thank you for joining City Club today on Friday, March 19th for this week's Friday Forum. Today we will learn about the unique needs of Oregon's at-risk youth and how those needs are being addressed. But first, some announcements. In consideration of those sitting close to you and those in our radio and television audiences, I ask that if anyone has not yet turned off their cell phone to please do so at this time. As always, we offer our appreciation to our Friday Forum corporate sponsors, whose generous financial support make these City Club luncheons possible. Please join me in offering our appreciation to our new spring quarter sponsors, Key Private Bank, Northwest Natural, and Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt. We greatly appreciate your support. City Club's annual membership drive is going on now. If you join City Club during the drive, we will not only waive the $25 new member fee, but we will also add 2 free months to your yearly membership. So you get 14 months of membership for the price of 12. If you're already a member, we encourage you to help us spread the word. For every new member that names you as their referral on your application, both you and they will receive a coupon for a complimentary lunch at Friday Forum. Best of all, the member who refers the most new members during the drive, which ends on April 15th, will receive a grand prize of a 4-night stay in Hood River, 2 bottles of Oregon wine, and a tour of a local vineyard. So that should be incentive enough. City Club staff is happy to help you become a member right now if you're not already one, and you can see them at the tables in the back of the room. At next week's Friday Forum, we will learn about the future of renewable energy and its potential impact on Oregon. And now to today's program. The needs of teen parents and their infants, young adults in juvenile custody, and homeless street youth go too often ignored by the communities they live in. Though Portland is lucky to have one of the strongest social service networks in the country, it still struggles to serve its youth at risk. Today we will hear about the status of homeless youth and other vulnerable young populations in Oregon, the challenges of creating effective delivery systems for them, and the miracles that a committed and caring community can achieve. Since 1980, Dennis Morrow has served as executive director of Janus Youth Programs, which serves more than 600 extremely high-risk children and youth each day. A licensed professional counselor, he has developed counselor and parent training programs for over 30 years, and including seminars which examine such topics as the impact of race and gender on the therapeutic relationship. He has provided trainings and workshops on social service issues to literally tens of thousands of people. Our speaker is also a management consultant working for both nonprofit and for-profit businesses and serves as an instructor at both PSU and PCC. Sounds like a busy guy. In 2009, he was recognized by the University of Portland as one of the significant 75 graduates from their Pamplin School of Business. And now, please help me welcome today's speaker, Dennis Morrow.
All right. Well, thank you, Sue. Thank you, City Club, for the opportunity to be here. I should provide a little bit of a disclaimer before we get started. I have been told that if I do a 10-minute speech, I'm actually pretty good at it. I've also done training for about 30 years, and I do really good if I have things I can write on and I can spend a whole day with you. But I've actually never done a 30-minute speech, so I'm not sure what's going to happen today till we get started. But we appreciate the opportunity to be here and not talk about Janus, although I'll talk a bit about that and I'll talk about me, but more talk about the youth that we serve and the youth that are in our communities, and maybe a little bit of a relationship. I'm thinking about some of the future studies you might even be able to do along those lines. She was 21 with her life ahead. You don't need to know her name. She breathed her last on a cold stone floor of a Hollywood arcade. But fate's right hand isn't always just. It puts a lot of pressure on your faith and on your trust. She was just a little girl, not enough to rage against the day. How did we get so lucky? Targets, on the rifle range. Who makes the call? Who gets to choose? Who gets to win? And who gets to lose? It's like rolling dice in the belly of the blues, and the blues never fade away. Sir Elton John's lyrics from a 2006 album give eerie voice to our lost children. Children we don't want to see or even realize they exist, because the very sight or recognition of them creates too much discomfort, shame, or guilt in our minds, so we simply avoid them. I'm Dennis Morrow, Executive Director of Janus Youth Programs, where, as was mentioned, I've worked since 1980. I did give them a 3 to 5 year commitment in 1980 because I get bored very easily. If you work with 600 teenagers a day, you never get bored, so I'm stuck. However, I also want to congratulate the City Club on that amazing endowment drive. I do teach at the Nonprofit Institute at Portland State University on the management side of things, and you have clearly gone against the trend of the recession to be able to do that, and I think it's something to be extremely proud of. And I'd also like to announce today that we are changing our name to the Janus City Club, so from here on out would be, because I know where to follow this that you're saying, but congratulations. Janus is one of the best kept secrets in Oregon, founded in 1972 by 3 committed citizens, named after the Roman god of transitions, not, as many people used to think, Janis Joplin. We have grown to be one of the largest adolescent service agencies in the state, but we still remain the place that nobody knows. Janus operates over 40 different programs at 20 different locations in Oregon and in Southwest Washington, all of which serve the highest of high-risk youth. For instance, we have group homes for teenage girls in the child welfare system. Those girls by 15 or 16 years old will have been in, you name, 8, 12, 15, up to 23 foster homes before they get to us. We provide long-term treatment for juvenile sex offenders under custody of the Oregon Youth Authority, both before and after they come out of the jails. We have an entire continuum of services for runaway youth, who we define as kids that have homes to go back to, and for homeless youth, where the kids have no homes to return to. And we work on that end of things both in Vancouver and in Washington. We're a regional provider of services for those kids. As mentioned, we operate the largest teen parent program in the state. We have an alternative high school, and we actually have 85,000 square feet of garden under tillage. Over 200 youth sleep with us every night of the year because they do not have families like you to go home to, or the families are not safe. And we work with over 600 boys and girls ages 0 to 25 every single day, 365 days a year. But I'm not here today to talk about Janus, but about our youth. I do think one other disclaimer. When they first called me on this, I wanted to be clear, I'm not an expert. I actually have 2 degrees in business administration and in counseling, 2 master's degrees. I don't know if any of you have been to school lately, but I found out something very profound, which is neither one of them prepared me for the jobs that I've had to do since then. So I consider myself a product of the modern educational system. I'm highly educated, but really unprepared to function in reality. I actually thought my first degree in counseling, I moved in Oregon in 1973 with a master's degree in counseling, having studied drug addiction, and I began to work for the methadone treatment program where I worked for 7 years. I thought I was ready to do something when I came out of school with that degree until I met my first client. My first client down on 4th and Oak was a gentleman named Ken. I still remember him quite well because the way I met him was the receptionist called and said, "Dennis, Ken is here to see you. You need to come up front right away." I said, "No, I'm happy in my office with my degree on the wall waiting to see him. Send him on back." She said, "No, you need to come up front." So I went up front, and what I saw was there was, who I found out later to be my client, in the waiting room, but unfortunately he had his finger in the chest of my boss yelling at the top of his lungs. My boss, who is a PhD clinical psychologist, also in the waiting room, has his finger in the chest of my client, also yelling at the top of his lungs in front of several other clients and colleagues. And I was, after all, a probationary staff working for the state of Oregon. The issue was dress code in the clinic, and this is where my degree began to fall apart. My boss, the discussion was something like this: PhD, boss to client, this is a state of Oregon mental health clinic. When you come here, you need to come dressed appropriately for services. Street addict to boss, this is my effing clinic. We're on TV, so we'll do that. I pay your salary with my fees, and I'll come in here dressed any way I want. Now, the issue was it was a really hot day. You know how we get one of those hot days in July or August? It was a really hot day in Oregon. My client had ridden his motorcycle down. He had a motorcycle helmet on before it was even required. He also had a loincloth on. After I successfully intervened, got him back to the office and sat down, he crossed his legs, and I realized all he had on was a motorcycle helmet and a loincloth. I don't know about you, but my graduate school, we did not role play that particular situation. I looked at Ken. He started my new career. I looked at Ken and I said, when I came out of school, I thought I knew what I was going to do today. You have changed my mind. I think I have something to offer you, but I think you're going to have to tell me what it is. And so Ken taught me that in college we fill people's head with theories, but the theories only work until you put a real person into them. In business school, we fill businesses with theories. They only work until you drop a real business into it. And so my career since Ken has been having people educate me, whether I'm working with parents, whether I did marital therapy for a while, whether I'm working with drug addicts, whether I'm working with staff. What I began to realize is I can't go to school and tell them what they need, but if I listen, they can tell me. So I never come before a group, and certainly around kids. I have been a counselor. You'll notice very carefully I've never counseled successfully adolescents in my life. I tried for 2 years and failed miserably. I really appreciate the staff that we have that can do that. I'm good with adults, not with kids. But what I found out is I need to hear the stories about what they need from me. And so what I'm going to bring you today is a compilation of stories. I have worked with about 25,000 people in my life now, of all ages and sections of the country. And I tend to think of myself as a big ball of string. I don't come as an expert. I don't know stuff that somebody else doesn't know, but I know stuff that people have told me. And it's really those stories that I'd like to share with you. I do get credit for one degree that I have. I always claim credit for that. That's my degree in DAD, Dad. I am a father. I have 8 children, ages 13 to 45. I have 6 children living at home with me, ages 13 to 45. Any questions why I have so many jobs? All right. All of my children are adopted. I have 2 older kids that were adopted by virtue of a remarriage. We have 3 20-something kids that were adopted out of the child welfare system, and we adopted our 3 grandchildren because of drug abuse that my older daughter was involved with for several years. Thank God she's clean and sober now, but the kids are ours, and we're mom and dad to them, and their grandpa and grandma no more. This experience, and I bring that up because it's given me a totally different perspective about educational and social service systems. I'm not just a provider of service, but a consumer of services. And it looks a lot different when you're trying to get services than when you're giving them. I found myself over and over having to battle with schools or school districts, with mental health providers, my own colleagues, with the state of Oregon, to get basic services which I knew my children had a right to. I began to realize that many of our service systems are actually set up to screen out certain kinds of kids and families rather than to take them in, to make them invisible rather than to make them visible, and to actually save money by not serving them rather than to spend the money that's there to be served. This experience personally has profoundly altered the way I approach service delivery and planning, because I know my children, and every one of them has had special needs. They're all high-risk adoption kids. I know that every one of my kids got every single service they had coming. Why do I know that? Because take a look at me, and what do you see? You see somebody who is white, you see somebody who is college educated, you see somebody who speaks English, you see somebody who is middle class, and you see somebody who knows almost everybody in the systems. And I happen to be informed about the laws. I can absolutely tell you, you take away any one of those variables, and my kids would not be where they are today. If I'm not white, if I don't speak English, I watch people's kids get screwed over. Sitting in the school office beside me, they didn't get the meeting with the principal because they didn't know to threaten to have the TV cameras come down and do the interview. They didn't get their kid transferred because they didn't know the right words to say. They didn't get the services that the state was denying them because they didn't know what the law was. And I could look them in the eye and say, I wrote the law, I know what it is. And that's what I want to bring with you today. So I have experience being invisible. I have experience of having my children invisible. I have experience seeing my children unwanted. And I'd like to talk to you today and try and be a voice for the youth that Janus serves, the ones you don't want to see. Now, before we proceed, since we're going to be talking about kids, I need to do an intelligence test, because I never like to work with adults if you're not smart enough to take in the information. I know it's the City Club, I know it's an intellectual group, but let's face it, I don't see many teenagers out there, so let's see how well you do. I'm going to give you an intelligence test by giving you 4 questions that came off of last year's college admission test. And then we're going to compare your answers as a group with the answers that college students actually gave in this country today. I figure if you're at least as smart as a 16-year-old, we can deal with it. Otherwise, we have to do a remedial speech first. All right. Question number 1. This is a quiz show. Question number 1. What is the fibula? Bone in the leg. Can we lock that in, as they say on the quiz show? Lock that in? Sorry. Actual answer given by a youth somewhere in America, hopefully not yours, on this question, getting into college. What is the fibula? A small lie. Okay, since you can't handle the advanced science questions, we'll go back to something more basic. We're in the process of changing seasons here, so let's do an easy one. Name the 4 seasons. Winter, spring, summer, fall. I hear that. Can we lock that answer in at least? Winter, spring, summer, fall. Sorry. Actual answer off of the college test. I only bring you real stuff, by the way. I never have to lie. Reality is much better. Actual answer that some kid put on that. Name the 4 seasons. Salt, pepper, mustard, and vinegar. Better go home and see what your kid put on the test, I'm telling you. All right. Let's try again. What's a terminal illness? Think like a teenager. But sick in the bus terminal. That's very close. Now you're thinking, yeah, the actual answer was when you get sick in the airport. But see, I heard bus terminal, so we're starting to think like a teenager. All right, now I got you. All right, last question, final exam. How do you keep milk from turning sour? Think like a teenager. Drink it. Beautiful. Unfortunately, that was 1990s teenage thinking. We have a new generation of kids. I thought very creative. How do you keep milk from turning sour? Keep it in the cow. Okay, looks like we have a little ways to go. All right. How many people here that don't work or volunteer or aren't in the social service system have actually heard of Janus? Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Okay. So a significant number, but by far not the majority. I often call us the invisible parents because we're raising more children than almost anybody in the state, but most of the people still haven't heard of us. And you haven't because you don't see us because you don't see our kids. You don't want to see us because you don't want to see our kids. If you did, it would cause you significant internal discomfort and pain. Let me give you an example. I'm going to read you a letter of commendation. Just came in, actually, 2 days ago when I was preparing remarks. This letter came in from one of our supervisors about a kid that we had in one of our emergency shelters. It says, Dear Dennis, Wednesday afternoon, March 10th, Bobby came to the shelter in handcuffs. The police brought him in handcuffs, crying and whimpering. He had been removed from his home, as is his 2 younger sibs who went somewhere else, for severe child abuse and neglect. Apparently, his mother has been keeping him tied up and locked in dark closets since he was a young child. Bobby is 13 years old, stands 4 feet 8 inches tall, and weighs about 100 pounds. He smelled strongly of urine and feces. Bobby was frantic, nonverbal. He rummaged around the staff office. He opened cabinet drawers. He ruffled all the papers on the wall, wandered back and forth, went out the door several times, setting off the alarm, and then ran back inside. He would hide under, it became clear he was extremely terrified of female staff. He would hide under the pool table when a woman came in the room, go into the corner of the office when approached by a female. He couldn't even sleep in a room with the other kids. He chose to sleep on a couch in the community room with the lights on. Oh, and did I tell you, he was also traumatically mute. Could not speak. How did it feel as you heard Bobby's story? Did anybody notice any discomfort with that? Anxiety? Maybe even a little sad, or maybe even a little ashamed that we have a country where that can go on. Wouldn't it be easier to just sort of forget him? That's really what happens to the youth we serve at Janus every day. Please remember Bobby, because I want to show you what happens when we forget him. How invisible are our kids? Janus serves about the same number of kids every day as Jefferson High School, or Marshall High School, or Roosevelt High School. How many people in here have heard of Jefferson, Roosevelt, or Marshall High School? Every hand goes up, but only about half of the hands had heard of Janus. In the last year, we actually served more kids than Catlin Gable, Central Catholic, and Jesuit combined. How many people have heard of Catlin Gable, Jesuit, or Central Catholic High School? Every hand goes up. The truth is, it's far more comfortable to not see some of the youth that live among us than to open your eyes and see. Now, why is that? Because it starts with the human brain. What do we know? We know that the primary function of your brain is to help you repeat what you have done before. Repetition for the brain creates predictability, and predictability creates the illusion of safety. It isn't always safe, but it's safer to know what's going to happen than to do something new. So, for example, how many of you here have ever been on a diet? Oh, come on. All right. Now, see, I'm not worried about that's not the operant question. The operant question is, how many of you have been on more than one diet? Yeah, there's a few hands going up there, right? See, repetition, safety. In organizational and in personal change, one of the points I always try and make is that it is much different to actually do a different thing, that's real change, than doing the same thing differently. That's what the human brain wants to do. So I'll go on the Atkins diet, the high carb diet, the low carb diet, the all water diet, the no diet, thinking I'm doing something different every time, but I'm just repeating the same behavior over and over. Anybody in here been divorced? See, a diet's like this, divorce is like this, all right. Okay, come on guys, I know 50% of you have, get over it, all right. But what do we know? We know that just over 50% of first marriages end in divorce, but what do we know? We know that 60 to 85% of second and third and fourth and et cetera marriages end in divorce. Repetition, safety. Repetition, safety. Same husband, new body. Now, on the other hand, discomfort and even pain are the primary, maybe the only motivators for change. So I hope you leave today feeling more uncomfortable when you came in, maybe even a little irritated at me for making you see. What you do with the pain is your choice, but I hope it moves you to take action on behalf of a child other than your own. Or, as we tell our Janus board members, and I have a table of them today, appreciate you being here, these are some bold folks. When we recruit board members, I start out saying, this is not the Boy Scouts. This is not Campfire. This is a totally different board. And what we want them to do is what I want you to do is be a voice for the kids that have no voice and make visible the kids that aren't. Now let's take a look at some of what you see in the invisibility versus maybe some of what we see when we're working with these kids. As you leave today, probably, almost inevitably, I drove in, I'm sure you're going to find this, you're going to walk past on the way back to your car or be accosted by a spiky-haired, tattooed, backpack-toting youth with a dog and long silver chains hung threateningly about their body, probably asking you for spare change to get a bus to Los Angeles or food for the night. You see homeless youth. You see someone that wants to be out there for the kicks, who probably has parents somewhere that want them, and who could really benefit from a good dose of scared straight. We see homeless child, part of a growing number of children in this country, city and state, who literally have no safe or viable home to return to. Whether it's substance abuse, physical or sexual abuse, a reaction to the kid's sexual orientation, I know of very few 13-year-olds, and think about a child that age, I know of very few 13-year-olds who would trade a warm bed and regular meals for life on the streets. What do I get on the streets? My bed is a sleeping bag under the Hawthorne Bridge, rain or shine. My job is selling money, or selling my body to older men to be able to survive, and my recreation is using drugs to cover the pain. When we see homeless youth, we don't see the issue beneath. Remember Bobby? Remember Bobby? Could anyone imagine him running away from that home? At 13, when you finally have legs and the police have yanked you out of there, but they send him back. Could anyone imagine him running away from that home? Can anyone imagine him desperately wanting to have a home, but knowing that it means only more pain, more torture, and that nobody seems to know or care? So instead of a homeless youth, I prefer the language familyless child, because that's the real issue in America today. By the way, Bobby was moved to a foster home, which we'll talk about later, and he ran away from there and is somewhere on the street now. Last year, Janus made over 30,000 contacts in this city with familyless children on the streets of Portland, trying to talk them in from the cold. Another 5,000 contacts with homeless youth in Clark County, Washington. When you see homeless youth, you see threat, fear, desperation, and loathing. We see hope. Janus works in a collaborative partnership in downtown Portland with 3 other agencies. We work with Outside In, New Avenues for Youth, and the Native American Youth Association. It's a nationally recognized coalition, a collaborative process that actually originated from work the City Club did many years ago. And I am here to tell you what we do in Portland exists nowhere in the country. We have 1,000 youth who are screened in for service every year. About 750 of those will enter one of the 2 shelters that Janus operates. 400 or so will be referred to our partner agencies for treatment and support. And if we can get a youth from the street into a transitional living program with a case manager, we have an 85% success rate. An 85% success rate. It is higher than almost every population you can deal with, except sex offenders, who I will talk about next. You see a junkie on the street, a 14-year-old girl who's addicted to heroin downtown. She eventually made it into our system. Today, she's finishing her 3rd year in medical school at OSHU. She finished PSU with a 3.95 GPA. She has a goal of going into family medical practice and actually volunteering to go to 3rd world countries and work in places like Haiti to help the other kids and families out. You see the end of the road, we see a miracle just waiting to happen. Now, you may hear on the evening news tonight about another one of our populations, maybe the latest episode of adult sexual offending behavior. Rape, incest, torture, even murder. And you immediately know when you see one of those stories, because I think it immediately, my daughter's been raped on the streets. So I know what I think, I know what I would do with one of those jerks if I ever had him in front of me. We get that chance every day at Janus. 2 of our most successful programs work with 30 young men, ages 14 to 24, who have been adjudicated for sexual offenses. One program works to keep them from going to jail. One program works with 17 to 24-year-old young men after they come out of jail to reintegrate into society. It is some of the most important work we do, but unlike you, we can't go out and establish an endowment for sex offenders. Why? Because nobody wants to see them, nobody wants to know. You see perpetrator, we see victim. Every one of the boys we work with has experienced severe and often profound abuse prior to perpetrating on others. And their victims are not predatory, it's almost always victims in their own family. They aren't the adult predators you see on TV. These are children whose internal damage leads them to harm others. For instance, a 13-year-old boy who was referred to us a couple years ago, he came in having spent a year in jail for sexually offending his sister. However, when he was a baby, his mother was a meth addict, and she used to hang him in a sack in the garage while she would go out on a meth run. Now remember Bobby? Could you imagine the possibility that Bobby, a boy who has been tortured and tied up and locked in a closet by his mother since his birth, could you imagine he might develop some mental health issues? Could you imagine he might have feelings about women and girls? And could you imagine he might want to try and get even at some point? Could you imagine him doing so? I could absolutely see Bobby being a kid that would eventually end up in one of our programs, if he's not intervened with now, as a juvenile sex offender. Is he going to be a criminal then, or is he a victim? You see tax user with these kids, we actually see taxpayers. When a youth graduates from our older youth program, 17 to 24, they have spent 5 or 6 years of their adolescence, their entire adolescence, locked up in jail. When we send them out into society, they have a treatment program, they're safe. They also have an unsubsidized private sector job. They also have an apartment, and they will have a $3,000 to $5,000 bank account to help them in the future. They're paying taxes before they even leave. I actually had one boy who couldn't leave because the parole officer wouldn't let him out, and he was working at Tektronix. He actually got up to $10,000 in his bank account and came in and said, "Can I make a donation to Janus?" And I said, "Well, we don't take donations from the kids that are here." And he said, "Yeah, but I don't need all this money, and they won't let me leave. I might as well give it to somebody that can use it." And he wanted to make a donation back to us. All right, miracles do happen. Our program for younger boys has a 100% success rate, no recidivism for sex offenders over the last 5 years that we know of, and probably out to 10 years. Every success is one less adult in prison and could be anywhere from a handful to hundreds of victims that are spared the pain of that. Why do we do this? We work with them 2 to 3 years, sometimes 4 years, and sometimes we become the family that they don't have. We sometimes go from being a treatment program to an orphanage because at 17, there's no place for these guys to go. We're going to stick with them. But you know what? We do that because we know miracles can happen. We know that a Bobby can heal and come out whole if he has the support that he needs to do that. So when we see one of these young men coming back, and I'll tell you the one thing, it just tears me up. I can't even talk about it. When you see one of these guys coming back with a wife and a baby, and they're coming back to visit the other boys to show them what can happen. And I look at that and I think, where would that kid be without us? Where would that baby be without us? Where would that wife be without us? Miracles happen every single day. You might see an adolescent girl with a baby, 14, 15-year-old child with a child. And what do you see? You probably see fear, sadness, confused adolescent. You probably think, why would she ever do that? You probably see, most people will see, welfare mom in the making. Our teen parent program works with over 300 of those girls and their babies every year. The staff have this amazing ability, when they see a mom and a baby, they see a mom who wants to be the best mom she can be, and they never make a single judgment about why did you do that, or a single judgment about can you be capable or competent. The issue is, what do you need, because you're going to be a good mom because we know you want to be. And what does that do? Miracles happen every day for those girls as well. We do in-home visits. We do parenting education groups. We have domestic violence specific services for girls that are involved in that, and we have housing programs. The reality is, if we don't provide those services, then you are looking at some of the most extreme risk, and you want to talk about a social policy, this drives right through the heart of what I think is one of the biggest ones we have to face. If you do not get services to a child when that baby is born, a child being a teenage girl mother, when that baby is born, the children of teen mothers are 3 times more likely to suffer abuse and neglect, affecting 1 in 10 of them. They are twice as likely to end up in foster care, and once they're in foster care, they will stay an average of a year longer than other kids in foster care. Now, what do we know about foster care? I'll tell you, it's pretty sad. What we know is if you take a kid, the longer they spend in foster care, the lower their outcomes. In fact, kids that actually graduate, we call it at 18, they grow out of foster care, they are more likely to end up homeless on the street or dead than they are to graduate from college. And we'll have more of these girls with their babies in foster care for a longer period of time. The boys of teen moms are twice as likely to end up in jail. You want to have an amazing study, I can tell you how to reduce the entire prison population of this country by 4%. Can you imagine that? 4% reduce it down. All you have to do is delay teen births to the age of 20. Because the risk for those boys is so high, they end up constituting a full 4% of all of the adult prison population. But the teen pregnancy rate, instead of going down, is actually on the increase. Once again, in this country, in this county. Probably because we had a very large push out of our federal government around abstinence-based prevention. And I will tell every parent group I ever work with, just say no does not work for a teenager. Doesn't work for many parents, but it definitely does not work for a teenager. It doesn't work for drugs, it doesn't work for alcohol, it doesn't work for sex, it doesn't work for birth, it just doesn't work. So what do we know? We tell them that we have more teen births. 20% of the teen births in this county are now second children. 1 in 5 are second children. So we are faced with 15 and 16-year-old girls who have 2 babies under the age of 2. We get 20 to 25 calls a week for housing, and our programs are full. 20 to 25 calls a week for girls needing housing, and our programs are full. Now, you see failure, which is that possibility. What about the miracle? Insights, which is our teen parent program, was founded by a woman named Diane Cohen-Alpert. Interestingly enough, she founded that program because it was a girl named Sarah, who was a 15-year-old teen mom, that came to her 30 years ago and said, Diane, I want to have a support group for moms like me. And Sarah now has a master's degree in nursing, 4 children of her own, and is a proud grandma. Insights is 30 years old. Sarah's now, 30 years later, a miracle. And finally, another one of our invisible youth population, gangs. When you look at a gang member, what do you see? You see desperate criminal men destroying their neighborhoods. When we went to North Portland, we saw first-generation immigrant boys who had no way to fit into a new culture, even at the level of speaking the language. I mentioned earlier, we operate actually one of the largest urban agriculture programs in the whole state. We should actually be Janus Farm Programs instead of Janus Youth Programs. So we have 2 large community gardens and housing projects, and we have a full acre of land under cultivation on Sauvie Island. That full acre of land is specifically cultivated by teenagers who use it as an entrepreneurial learning project. So year-round, they plan, they plant, they harvest, they grow, they prepare, and they come downtown to the Portland State Farmers Market and sell the goods. And they learn how to do math in school, be a part of a business, be a part of a team, grow up, and be healthy, positive adults in the community. Last 3 years ago, I think it was, or 4 years ago, Janus actually had to register as an organic farm, which was a little bit of a stumble for me. I come from Iowa, but I never thought I'd be running a farm. But if you sell over $5,000 of organic food, you have to register. Last year, we went over $11,000 those kids made in terms of the organic gardening. But what's the important part of that? The important part is when you talk to adults in their community, I've heard them actually say in public forums, I can tell a garden youth, I can tell somebody who is in this Janus Garden program because of how they conduct themselves, how they feel about themselves, and how they treat others. And I know they're not in gangs. I know they're not in gangs. Remember Bobby? Do you think his hellhole childhood could create an angry boy looking for someplace he could belong? But where you see failure, we see opportunity. Our garden youth, one of our garden youth this year is the 800-meter champion in the state of Oregon at the track and field. And another was last year's Rose Festival representative for her school at Roosevelt. And I think we either have 5 or 7 of these youth that are now in college on various types of scholarship that we've either supported or arranged. The hope is always there. Finally, let me finish off talking about the real elephant in the living room, or the closet for high-risk teens, and that's gender. Because you might see boys and girls, this is one I have a personal investment in, I see life and death. Being a teenage boy is the largest untreated childhood disease we have in America today. More boys die between 12 and 24 from preventable causes that are related to being male than any disease. Anybody know what the top 3 causes are? Why do kids die 12 to 24? Suicide, number 2. Car accident's number one, but it's a very specific constellation. It is a car accident with 2 teenagers or more in the car and alcohol involved. And that's 1.5 times more boys than girls. Suicide, 70% of our teen suicides are boys. 70% of teen suicides are boys. And you just saw, if you were watching the news the last couple days, Cornell is having a rash of suicides, all boys. College campuses in the 20 to 24 age across the country, a rash of suicides, almost all boys. And the third highest cause of death is homicide. And 95% of that is boys shooting boys. An African-American boy in America today is more likely to die from gunfire than an African-American soldier in the Vietnam War. Think about sending your child out into that every day. Janus has been a pioneer in the study of gender-specific treatment for boys and men. It's not that we are overlooking our young women. We have had for many years gender-specific treatment programs for them. There was a big movement in the 90s that took us forward in terms of how we level the field for our girls. But what did you notice recently? Again, just came out in the paper recently. All of a sudden, girls have for the first time exceeded boys in math scores. That was the headline. Anybody read the sub-headline? Boys' reading scores are crashing. Boys' reading scores are crashing. Do you know that boys are twice as likely to be injured or die from child abuse as girls? The boys will commit 4 out of 5 crimes, 9 out of 10 alcohol and drug violations. 2/3 of our special ed population are boys. They're 2 to 4 times more likely to be labeled ADD, ADHD, and 44% and falling college undergraduates. Colleges are starting football programs in this state to attract boys in because they're going down to close to 30% of a male population. Now, what do we know? We know there's substantial differences in brain and biology between males and females that begin at birth. For instance, testosterone correlates with high activity levels, risk-taking, and aggression. Testosterone does not create violence. High activity levels, aggression, and risk-taking. Male teenage monkeys are more likely to do stupid stuff than teenage girl monkeys. One tribe of monkeys, they actually die at about 4 times as fast, very similar to our teenage boys. But what else do we know? We know that our elementary school educational system is built for girl brains. 95% of the teachers are female. This isn't a sexist issue. It's just one of those, whoops, we didn't realize there was a difference in brains, so it shouldn't make any difference who's putting the classroom together. It does. It makes a profound difference. Our treatment systems are designed for girl brains because all of the theories have been by females practicing on females. Men don't go in for treatment. Take a look. There weren't too many guys on Freud's couch talking about their Oedipus complex. It just wasn't happening. Carl Rogers did not have a whole bunch of guys coming in spilling their guts. So we have theories that were created around the needs and the functioning of women. And what we do is we put boys and men into those treatment programs or boys and men into those schools, and then when they fail, they just go down the line. So they go from school to a dropout to a homeless youth to Janus to a drug treatment program. The drug treatment program fails them and they end up in jail. And the biggest, most successful treatment program we have for men in this country is jail, where we have more of them locked up than any institution or any country on the face of the earth. Why? Because we aren't doing the stuff we need to do earlier. Do we know what to do? Yeah, it's out there. Part of what we're trying to do is we've developed training, and we're doing it statewide and actually nationally to start getting people to look at this. The answers are there, the solutions are there. They aren't that complicated, but I will tell you a little secret. What a gang does on the street is an exact model for what teenage boys need. But they know how to do it, and our treatment programs don't. So let me go off script for just 1 second, and then we'll finish off. The 1 second is to say, I'm talking about kids, I'm talking about Janus, I'm also talking about, when I say Janus, I'm talking about staff. When our kids are invisible, so are the people that work with them. I know we've got Chris and some other folks from other agencies here. One of the biggest travesties in this state is that we pay people so little for taking care of the kind of youth I'm talking about. I'm talking about $9 and $10 an hour. I'm talking about staff that work for me that qualify for food stamps. I'm talking about staff where the sex offender kids coming out of the training school gets jobs paying more than they get paid to take care of them. They don't have PERS, they don't have a public disability fund, they don't have family paid medical insurance, and they don't have enough money to live on. And that's a social policy, from my standpoint, we absolutely have to end, period. So close your eyes again. Think of sex offenders, think of homeless youth, think of teen moms, think of gang members, think of out-of-control boys. What do you see? Open your eyes. Think of miracles, think of potential, think of hope, think of resilience. What do you see now? I'm hoping you leave here feeling less easy than you came in. If you're the same, I've failed miserably. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by how much work they do, because what do we know? We know that the recipe for success with a kid is a relationship with one caring adult somewhere. Everybody can make a difference. So I'd like to end with one last story. I'd like to tell you about a girl named Julia. She was born to a teen mother. Her mother was 14 years old and was in the state child welfare system when Julia was born. When the mother found out that the baby might get taken away from her, she ran away and hit the streets of Portland. She was gone several weeks, and during the course of that time as an infant, Julia was physically abused, sexually abused, starved, and neglected. Eventually they found the mom, eventually they found the baby. Julia went into foster care. By a year and a half old, Julia had been in 6 foster homes and had been removed for the last one because she was found with a slap mark on her face from the foster home that was supposed to keep her safe at 1.5 years old. She was labeled as RAD, reactive attachment disorder. What that means to us is that she had such profound trauma in her early life that her brain was transformed in a way that would never allow her to experience empathy or love. She would forever be disconnected from other people. Think Adolf Hitler and serial killers if you want to think of the extreme of the RAD diagnosis. She was placed by the state into an adoptive family. The family really had not a clue about what they were getting into. When she hit 11 or 12 years old, which is very typical for these kids, she hit the street. She was run away at 11 years old. She was on 82nd Avenue at 12. She lived on the streets. She was actively involved in drugs, especially meth. She spent 2 years of her adolescence in locked psychiatric care, still returned to the streets and drugs, until age 22, when she finally got into a program, and it was the right timing and the right place, and her life turned like that. Julia is now a mother after saying that she never would be. She said, "I will never do to a child what was done to me. I will never have a baby." She is a mother, she is married, and she is displaying love that you cannot believe. Couldn't be prouder to call her my daughter. If Julia has taught me anything, it is never give up on any child. Always see the hope, and always remember a miracle can happen. I often go back to Peter Pan. All it takes is a little fairy dust and a happy thought. How did we get so lucky? Targets on the rifle range. Who makes the call? Who gets to choose? Who gets to win and who gets to lose? You do. You do.
Well, I think we just got an example of why these forums are so important. So the first question for our speaker, if you can still speak, Leslie, is from our Board of Governors member, Leslie Moorhead. She's a consultant providing financial management services for small business. Leslie has served on City Club's research board and served as research advisor to the club's 2008 study of Oregon's initiative and referendum system. She received the club's research award in 2007. Leslie?
Well, this is such a hard problem, and I often, as you probably do, wonder how we got to this situation and how we've, as a society, have failed all these children. But Dennis, I want to ask you about the bigger, broader picture, even that you presented when you talked about nationwide. I want to ask you to compare our current American society's at-risk youth problem with that of other countries. What are the statistics and, of course, your observations on homelessness and at-risk youth in other developed countries? Is this just an American phenomenon? Is it really worse here, or is this a worldwide problem?
This is the part where I remind you I'm not an expert. I don't have statistics or figures. I can give you a couple of examples from travel that I have done. I think what is an American problem is having a country where we have adequate economic resources to care for children and we don't. And that we allow, we tolerate, we subsidize, and sometimes even encourage the dumping of kids rather than the responsibility of parents for them. If you go to Europe, for instance, a lot of what we would call homeless youth here are actually traveling in Europe, well supported by the social system or by their parents. And it's not that there aren't problems there, but you don't see the same level of problems because you have a much different support network and a much different culture around it. A few years ago, I actually went to a conference in Argentina and went to visit because I was very interested. They had a homeless youth program there, so I went to visit this homeless youth ranch, which was run by a church outside of Buenos Aires. And the first thing, it was very interesting. They had almost word for word the same philosophy of working with kids that we do in terms of homeless youth. It was, as we were talking, it was like, wow, here you are completely across the hemisphere. The difference was, where did their kids come from? Their homeless youth were kids that they went into the streets of Buenos Aires and picked up at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old because their families had dumped them because they're so poor they couldn't raise them. Their homeless youth were kids that the families brought to them and left with them because they were so poor, and they actually had a very active program for family involvement with their kids as they got older. Now that was kind of a surprise to me because we define homeless youth as a youth who has had an irreparable break with their home. Their family is not available for them, a Bobby kind of a kid. So do we see that problem in other countries? Yes, but I see the driver of it, particularly in the third world countries, is poverty. We don't have that excuse. And I come back to this over and over, that when these kids are invisible, we don't have to say, I mean, we tolerate, when I do classes for parents going through divorce, I say, if you look at what happens to children in this country, we tolerate amazingly awful things to large groups of kids until it gets bad enough, and then we'll finally do something. You want a policy? You're living in a state where we have a 30% dropout rate for high school kids. I think it's something along the lines of 40% of 8th graders in Portland aren't going to finish high school on time. That's totally untenable. And it's not that hard to fix. It's complicated, but I don't think it's that hard to fix, but we can't fix it. Remember what the brain likes to do. Repetition is safety. Repetition is safety. Small school, big school, small school, big school, rearrange school. When I work with organizations, I tell them, don't ever reorganize. I won't even help you reorganize because that's just repetition. You need to knock it down and start all over. What would happen if we said, we don't have a school district in this city and we want to build one? And we want to build one from scratch that will service all of the kids, that will not allow drop. By the way, if you want to talk about public school funding, since you asked, the public schools are funded to serve the easiest 75% of the kids. Those dropouts, we have actually established a social policy where we don't fund the services for the harder kids, we just exclude them as they get older, mostly boys. If we were actually successful at dropout retrieval, that's why we'll never be successful, because if we actually brought those kids back in, the school districts would go broke. They do not even remotely have the resources to handle the ones that get excluded. So there's a social policy where we're doing it. So I think that's the biggest difference, and again, I don't have the data on that, but it's the difference in the origin of the problem.
We will now take questions from the floor. Asking questions at Friday Forum is a privilege of City Club membership. When you ask your question, please identify yourself as a member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less.
Matteo Luccio, City Club member. Besides changing funding priorities and fairy dust, what do you think would be the single most effective policy initiative at the local and, let's say, state level to start addressing these issues?
I wish it were that easy. And again, not being an expert here, so I'm just going to tell you what it looks like from the road. It's not a single policy issue, it's the intersection of policies. The consistency of the policy is failing to see and failing to serve kids early enough and well enough to prevent the damage later, and failing to hold parents accountable. So we see it whether it's a public school policy that allows, why should we allow kids to not be in school? I don't understand that. You can have a child welfare system that is not serving children as well as it should. Why should we fund? There was a study done a few years back, an outside study of the state child welfare system in Oregon. We contract with them, we work with them. They are under enormous pressure with very little resources. But the study said this system doesn't need more money, it needs better management. And actually, it's the first time I ever saw a study done by an outside consultant that said, don't give child welfare more money because we know we're underfunded. Now, it didn't say they can't use more money. It said until you fix the management of the system, you're not going to fix. So there's a policy. Why do we have an organization that's allowed to continue mismanaged in some areas to their own detriment, which I think. So, and then if you look at, again, divorce. What do we know about divorce? We know that 30 to 50% of the children who have come through divorce in this country over the last 40 years have come out with a lifetime scar. 30 to 50%. What else do we know? We know that that scar does not come from the separation of the parents. It comes with how the parents handle it. So right now, the state of Oregon is one of the most progressive in the country. We have mandated classes for parents who go through divorce. That's one of the things I do. And the interesting thing is parents will come to those classes really ticked off because they have to go there and the judge made them come and they have to pay, and they'll leave going, why didn't I know this before I got married? Seriously. So there's an example of a social policy where when those classes become mandated and parents have to go through them, you start seeing everything in terms of the conflict that affects the kids. You see everything go down. Do you know what the 3 conflict factors are out of divorce? It's the parents in conflict in front of the kids. That's number 1. Second is bad-mouthing the other parent. How many times do we do that? And the third is loss of a parent. Within 10 years after divorce, 30% of the kids will never see their biological parent again, and that's usually the father. And I got to tell you, if you take a father out of a child's life, then there's those risk factors. So I think we've got an example of social policy where we mandated some things, isn't social control, but mandated some things, don't allow it, and all of a sudden some change happens. I think we've got to have the courage. I was going to say something. I think we have to have the courage to step up and do that in some other areas.
Win Wakala, City Club member and also Executive Director for Oregonians Against Trafficking Humans. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the correlation between runaway and homeless youth and what we see as prostitutes, which are actually prostituted children.
Thank you for saying that, but that's one of those where why do we even have to talk about this? When you pick up a girl for prostitution and she's the criminal, now what do we know? Right now the national numbers tell us this: if a child runs away from home and hits the street, within 48 hours 30% of them have been propositioned. Within 48 hours 30% of them have been propositioned to get into the sex trade. The target age group is 12 to 14-year-old girls. And it's a very lucrative business because they're a renewable product. It's not like drugs where you have to sell it and go get some more. You have a girl and you can use her over and over. The pimps make them think they love her. The pimps get them addicted to drugs. And we have had a number of these girls in our shelters. Very difficult to deal with because the relationship with that pimp is so strong. We actually are part of a project that I'm very proud of here. Our Harry's Mother program is part of a minor victims of sexual trafficking, MVST. So if the police bring a girl to us that they've picked up for prostitution in Portland, we have a SWAT team that immediately assembles. That involves an FBI agent, the Portland Police, a sexual assault resource center victim support person, and our counselor. And they're there right there. We can do emergency shelter right there. And we've had several of those young women who we have been able to encourage out of that. And we've had a lot of others that run away. We used to send these girls down to California because there's only about 4 programs in the country that do this work. One is Children of the Night in California. They've told us they don't want to take Oregon kids anymore. They won't take Oregon because the girls we're sending down there, they do the same thing down there they do up here, which is they run away. But when they run away in Los Angeles, they are in much worse situation than they are up here. So they're actually saying, thank you, but don't send us your kids. So what do we have to do? There's another policy issue. We have to develop something in this region that will help those girls survive. But the concept of criminalizing it instead of, now what do we know on the streets? If you look at homeless youth, if you're a homeless youth, you have to get by, you have to survive. And you basically have 3 ways you can survive. You can sell drugs, you can steal, or you can sell your body. And the origin of homeless youth services in Portland in 1981 or 82 or 83 or so, the origin of homeless youth services was actually trying to get juvenile prostitutes off the street. That's how prevalent it is in that. So it's a profound issue. I'm really glad whoever you are, the advocacy groups are out there. We got to do something about it. But it's not as easy as let's just give them a nice place to go. And the difficulty we get faced with at a social policy issue is the girls will not stay still unless you lock them up. And if you lock them up in a detention or a locked facility, then in essence you are penalizing them. And sometimes the people that want to lock them up are really the police because they want them around to testify against the pimps. So it's one of those, it's not as simple as just do this or do that, but we got to do something. And are we seeing, is Portland a center for the sex trade? I don't think we're a center for it, but are we a center for homeless youth trafficking, which bring that stuff with it? Absolutely. If you look at the homeless youth, they tend to travel nationally, but a lot of the travel on this country is up and down I-5 corridor. So they start in Vancouver, BC, they go down to San Diego. We happen to be one of the safer places to stop over. So we do see a lot of trafficking kinds of stuff going on because of just the sort of being a hub of that center. And it's an issue that is going to keep coming strongly.
Steve Novick, City Club member. Mr. Morrow, thanks so much for joining us today. Given what you said about the foster care system, what would you tell the Child Welfare Office to do? Would you tell them to throw resources at at-risk families, see if they can make them safe, and if that doesn't work relatively quickly, move directly to adoption? Or would it be possible to have a foster care system that actually works?
I don't know. No. That is the $64,000 question. Without getting too complicated on this, I don't think it's easy as let's just do foster care or don't do foster care. Could we keep more kids in their families if the families had the support they need? Absolutely. But what that whole philosophy of strictly keeping kids in their family neglects to account for is families that are not going to be there, period, and older kids who are very difficult. Now, if you get to foster care works for younger kids, but as they get older, it fails at an enormously higher rate. I have actually, a few years ago, began the concept of talking about orphanages. That's a nasty word, but I look at what's going on at Janus. We have treatment programs. The state pays us to take care of a boy for 6 to 9 months. We have some of those young men that are living in sometimes 2 or 3 different programs for up to 4 years. The truth is, we shift from being a treatment program to being the only place they can live. I think at some point we need to start naming some kind of a resource for helping the middle and older adolescents to safely matriculate through that system. So I think, but does foster care need to be fixed? I mean, definitely in terms of the oversight of the system. If you go back to the 1990s, interestingly enough, when there was a big recession, the child welfare system made cuts by stripping out mid-level supervisors, which made kind of sense because you don't want to take away services for kids. When that happened, I said 10 years from now we're going to have a disaster. Because what you do have is if you have excellent workers who are trying very hard, but you don't have enough quality supervision to provide them the support and the backup they need. And that's really one of the things I think when that management study looked at it, that was what they said. We have disparate interpretations of what child abuse is in different offices around the state. You have some places where you get a child abuse report if you have lice in your head, and in Portland you might be bleeding on the street before somebody picks you up. That doesn't make sense, but that's a management issue. That's not a system issue, that's a management issue. So I think it's thinking incrementally in terms of what do we do for the different kinds of kids. But I get really, whenever somebody says, let's just do wraparound services or let's just destroy foster care, it's not that simple. But I do think there are very clear systematic things you can do to approach that if we think about it as a system and not just as all these little pieces.
Bob Geary, member. My question's about law enforcement. You mentioned Bobby, and I can only wonder what the court does with such a parent.
Yeah. There are a lot of things you get away with as a parent, you do to kids, that would be criminalized if you did it to another adult. I mean, if any of you stood up in here and punched somebody in the nose, you could get arrested and charged for that. But if you went home and punched your kids in the nose, we'd call that child abuse, and something would happen to you, but not the same level of stuff. And I think when it goes back to this concept of invisibility, even the language we use around kids, I used to give a talk that was called magical thinking, because it said, the word child abuse, what does child abuse mean? See, it sounds so child abuse. You know, it means rape. It means Bobby's mom tying him up and locking him in a dark closet. It means people burning their kids with cigarette. It means people putting babies in boiling oil. It means people breaking the arms of their kids or the legs of their kids when they're drunk. That's what child abuse, but when we say child abuse, we can make it okay. So will something happen to Bobby's mom? I think so. Will it be maybe as severe as I would hope? Maybe not. But I think the larger issue is, again, where's the services for those parents? Why is Bobby there 13 years before somebody notices that? You know, why is that happening that long? Why don't we have a system that starts seeing this stuff earlier? And I think it's because a lot of us, even though we're supposed to see this stuff, it's easy to go like this when you're faced with one of those cases. So the law will do something about it, but the law is different when you apply it to parents than when you do. Same thing with divorce. The standard of what constitutes child abuse post-divorce is way different because the judge's interpretation is how important it is for the child to have contact with the parent. That's absolutely true. I support that 100%, but I don't think that means you lower the standard for what safety is. But you'll see that social policy actually in place in many cases.
Julie Burlingham, member. You answered my original question, which was how you mesh with Outside In, which I'm very interested in, and New Avenues of Youth, and PAIR, which is the interesting program that has an art gallery. But I just read as I came down here in the Oregonian that at 7 o'clock tonight at the Hollywood Theater, I wondered if you're familiar with this, there is going to be a movie called Playground, which is filmed on the streets of Portland about the child sex trade. And are you aware of that? I just wanted to give it a little publicity so we'll all go. Thank you.
And by the way, when you talk about police, I just want to make this point. It used to be, it was like police over there, social workers over there. That's not the case anymore. Every place we are successful with these highest of high-risk kids, you find all of the systems working together. If they're not working together, you got a problem. Downtown homeless youth, when we have assigned police officers who are dedicated to the homeless youth population, our system works much better. We have in Portland a very unique, Multnomah County, a very unique situation where when police pick up kids after hours, instead of taking them to detention, which is where they used to go. If your kid ran away, minor in possession, curfew violation, they would go to detention, get locked up with high-risk kids and get worse. Now they come to Janus, we have a 24-hour center, then we call you and the kids never even hit the jail. That's an amazing, but it only works because the police work with us around it. Sex trafficking, if we don't have the police actively engaged with that, it doesn't work. So it is one of those things. We see a lot of bad stuff about the police in the papers, but I'm telling you at this level in this county and in this city, we have a lot of cooperation, and that's really what makes the systems work. So, okay.
Well, we've run out of time for further questions today, and we'll have to stop. Please join us on March 26th to learn about the future of renewable energy in Portland. And as we close, please help me join me in expressing our appreciation one more time to today's speaker, Dennis Morrow. We're adjourned.